Blake, if you could be one celebrity, who would you be?
Easy. Bono. So I could put out a song called Toby, Get Over It.
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, a man who wonders if he will ever live down that Bono flub on the podcast, and I'm here with my co-host who dresses up as Bono every single Friday night, Toby Walters.
All I have to do to dress up like Bono is be sexy and put on sunglasses, so that's
it never
my
happens?
MO.
Okay. So
and Blake, what's more embarrassing, the fact that you didn't know who Bono was or the fact that you didn't know who Mick Jagger was?
That's actually a really fun one. I don't know. I would say Bono?
I feel like next year for our
Church Tech Madness?
Church Tech Madness, it should be like Blake's biggest flubs, and then everybody votes on it.
I like that. We do need a new topic next year.
You've got quite a few of them. So obviously, I dreamed, not obviously, but I dreamed of being a rock star at one point in life.
Who doesn't?
And did you ever watch The Wonder Years? You know that show?
I didn't. Toby, I watched all 9 seasons of The Office to work here, and now I still have a show I haven't seen.
It's okay. A coming-of-age story of a boy in the 60s and 70s, and there's like a specific episode where he dreams of being a rock star and joins a band, and I feel like it's just a reoccurring theme in young boys' life. Like, there's just this one moment where it's like, I could totally be in a band and like get the girls. And so I had that certainly growing up, and it was kind of like which path am I going to take? Do I want to go down the music path and be a rock star, and then I fell in love with gear and kind of got, really into live music production and recording studios and that whole thing.
And being on stage.
Well, it was behind the board or on stage. Like those are the kind of the two paths for me. And so, my trajectory moved back and forth between them. And do you know which one paid the bills?
I'm going to guess it's the one where you just started hanging out in all those closets.
Essentially, yeah. The point is neither one of them paid the bills very well.
But they were fun.
So
living on a dream.
Buying gear was it was the side hustle when I was pursuing the dream. And there's always these internal battles of, I think God's called me to do this, but I'm going to pay the bills doing this. And so it was...
I didn't know that you actually kind of had that. That is tough.
Yeah. So in like 2008, 2009, when the Great Recession happened, a lot of the work dried up for...
live gigs?
Yeah, live gigs. Like churches stopped spending a lot of money bringing in artists because they were... pulling back, being conservative with their funds. It made sense.
You can't feed dinner on live gigs.
They would put up some money to bring in Phil Wickham because, it's Phil Wickham. Everybody knows Phil Wickham. But, Toby Walters calls and says, hey, my band is available to lead worship. Would you be interested? It costs this. And no, I think we're gonna pass.
We only have Phil Wickham money. We don't have Toby Walters money. So
I was buying and selling gear 2008 to... well, let's say 2009 to 12 in there. And that was basically paying all the bills. But I felt like a crisis of calling, if you want to call it that.
Okay.
Let's trademark that right now.
Crisis of calling.
Crisis
trademark.
of calling. Because I felt like God had given me these gifts to be a worship artist and a worship leader, yet it wasn't happening for me. And so I really struggled with this battle while selling gear. And I was good at selling gear. Like it provided for my family. It brought all of my skills together in one sort of weird
scrapper, saver, and
exactly.
Savvy.
And so in 2012, I kind of got offered the job of a lifetime.
You got offered to be my friend?
That's not a job, Blake. That's a pleasure.
Okay.
Right?
Well, that's the nicest thing you've ever said to me.
So moved to Nashville in 2012, worked for a university as an artist in residence. Going to travel. I'm going to write and record all day. They're going to put me on tour.
This does sound awesome.
It was like the dream job. And I thought, finally, God has opened up the door for the thing I've always dreamed of. And do you know how long that elation lasted for me?
I'm going to guess about 10 seconds.
Yeah, about 2 or 3 days.
Dang.
Like 2 or 3 days into the job, I realized, oh man, like this is not the dream. This is not what I thought it would be. Reality.
It's scary when your dream
set
turns
in.
into a nightmare.
And so did that for about a year. And just the whole thing kind of like the university didn't have the enrollment, didn't have the funds that they thought they did. They started cutting jobs in this department like crazy. And I was the first one to go. And
How dare they?
it was such an interesting like re-perspective in my calling that all of a sudden and my wife's kind of said, well, what do you want to do now? And I said, I think I just want to buy and sell gear. Like I was satisfied and complete in the worship and the artistry. And I felt like God showed me my dream and I realized, you know what? That wasn't my dream. And he said, awesome. I have this other thing that you're really good at. Maybe we'll go down this path if you want. And I was, yeah, let's go down this path. And here we are 10 years later, Blake. This is 10 years of doing this full time. And, church gear would have never existed if I had continued down the worship path, or somebody else would have started a different version of it.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have been as good. Wouldn't have been as fun. And speaking of things that are good and fun, introducing the one and only Stephen Brewster to the podcast. Stephen, welcome to the show, man. How's it feel to be a repeat guest on Church Gear's podcast?
It feels amazing to be a repeat guest. I didn't know that there was such a thing. So is this a big community that I'm in, or is it a smaller community?
You are only the third. This is all going to be a series. You will have been only one of three as a repeat guest out of over almost 70 episodes.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Can you tell me who the others are?
Yeah, Todd Elliott and Josh Fisher. So
that's awesome. I love those guys.
Jesus Culture's drummer and Mr. Philo himself and Stephen Brewster.
That's amazing.
The cream of the crop.
I mean, those guys are way more talented than I am. So
And Blake, I noticed how you said now introducing, and it's like you don't even know how to describe the goat. You just went straight to his name.
Yeah, I almost did. You just go, the goat.
It's like, how do you even describe Stephen Brewster and what he does? I mean,
if you figure it out, tell me.
Yeah.
I'm sure his wife could probably give us a good answer, and that's about it. She's probably the only one who's done the amount of homework to know.
I mean, the man she loves who also does the dishes and takes out the trash on his best days, I bet.
I mean, I have children for that.
There we go.
That's why we had kids.
Someone's finally given a good argument for children.
Yeah, we had kids for those reasons. So
what's this episode all about, Blake?
All right, so this one is going to be hard conversations with yourself. So when you're up there,
so you found somebody with multiple personalities to have a conversation.
We did.
Good to know.
We found someone that was so cool. He's willing to go up into his brain noggin and let us in on the hard conversations he's had with himself. We've all had these moments, but sometimes we'll block it out, not pay attention to ourselves. So we're going to get real heady today.
Okay.
So Stephen, instead of doing 5 truths and a lie, you've got 5 internal battles and a fake.
Okay.
Do you think you're going to fool us?
So these are Stephen's own internal battles that you may or may not have experienced in your life.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, 5 of them I've experienced, right? And then
one's a fake.
Yeah.
Although I've only got, hang on, let's not look. I've only got 5 with me.
Wait, I think I gave you 4
and a fake.
4 and a fake. So I broke the rules.
Our odds got better, actually, for us.
Great.
Okay, number 1. Does what I am doing matter?
We can talk about that.
Toby, that sounds like the story you just told. Number 2, am I spending too much time on social media?
Oof.
The answer to that for me is now yes.
I mean, we're TikTok Live and Instagram Live. So
yeah, well, and I don't know, 30% of my job is social. So what's toxic is it'll be on the weekend. I'm not even supposed to be working, but I'll get on just to get that little hit when I'll see all the likes. It's terrible. Number 3, is what I do now still considered ministry?
Oh, now I'm having internal battles.
What if he wrote these about us?
I know.
The goal is for you guys to be in counseling after this
Perfect.
podcast. So.
Well, we both are.
We both started. Probably.
Good.
I think I literally started. I was thinking about this morning on the drive-in about 2 weeks after we talked.
Yeah.
So you were that patch that got me through before I finally started.
I mean, Blake and I have needed couples counseling for a while, so
it would be quite fun, I think, to do it. Number 4, how do I know if this thing I'm working on is good or working? We got too much confidence to struggle with that one. We know this is good and it's working.
Because Stephen Brewster came in on our podcast, so we must be crushing it.
We got the goat. All right, number 5. Will there ever be a day with no problems?
I can answer that right now.
And the answer is probably no.
Well, Jesus said in this life there will be troubles.
Yeah, that's
Monday
true.
through Friday. The weekends have no troubles, though. All right, Blake, do you have a gut feeling on these internal battles?
I think I do. I think I'm going to say that am I spending too much time on social media is not one. Because Steven feels like one of those guys that like they have the hard cutoffs at their day. Jeremy does this where he just puts his phone up at X time during the day. I'm going to bet that that's Steven.
See, I would almost agree with you because I feel like he might, am I spending too much time on social media? And the lie is he always knew he always spent too much time. But I'm going to go with number 5. Will there ever be a day with no problems? Because I feel like he would say like, absolutely not.
I have regrets.
I
Yeah,
know.
that's obvious. The answer now.
Yeah. I mean, I have many regrets as well, Blake. You being
the one that makes all the regrets feel better.
All right, Steven, what's the reveal?
You're right. Number 5.
Yes!
Sorry, Blake.
It is so good.
It's because you don't know
right
who
all the
Bono
time.
is. How the heck do you not know who Bono is? I mean,
Yeah, he would have told me. There's always
that
going to be
guy's
problems.
iconic.
Well, all right.
Have you gone back and researched Bono since this? Like, have
Ish.
you? Ish.
I'm not a big
Bro,
music.
like, first off, the punishment for not knowing Bono should be that you have to go back and learn all about Bono.
I thought it was death, but
wow. Toby just goes straight to
Corporate punishment on
Oh,
that one.
okay.
But
death. Well, have you been to America?
and do you think not knowing who Bono is or Mick Jagger is more embarrassing?
well, I think Bono.
Okay.
Just Mick Jagger's obviously like a legend as well, but I mean, Bono's world existed so far outside of just music and rock and roll, right? And I mean, philanthropy, thinker, speaker, author, Mick Jagger, awesome, but not quite the same reach.
Dang, that's a really persuasive, concise argument.
I mean, the GOAT just told you that you should have known who Bono was. You should be ashamed.
By the time I come back for my next episode,
Oh, no.
you need to have some Bono knowledge.
See, that's the thing. Brewster knows if that's what it takes to get him back on, I'll do it. So maybe we'll do a Bono quiz.
I
next time.
should have created a Bono trivia.
But I get to ask the questions.
What if it's, yes, he asked him against us two?
Yeah, and you actually research, and I just go off the fact that I've known who
That you
Bono
know.
was since I was like 10 years old.
Right, as you should.
Yeah.
That would be fun. All right.
Okay, so does what I'm doing matter? And see, I really struggled with this before I started buying gear for churches because I'd just buy gear off of Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace, and it felt like I was a day trader. Like I'm just
Right.
buying gear from one source and putting it on another. I'm providing for my family, but like, am I doing anything that's good? And so it's been interesting now, doing it for the church, and it's a new reality.
Yeah.
What was kind of your struggle with that?
So I was in the music business for like 10, 12 years. And then I was in church for cumulatively about the same amount of time. And I thought church was forever. Like my music career ended and I went to work in a church and I loved it. And I loved the team that I worked with and I loved the purpose and mission and passion of what we were doing. And so to me, I was never going back to music was never the goal or the plan. The plan was be an executive pastor on a team over creative, do that until I'm 60 and then go be a campus pastor and ride out the sunset. And so when that all started shifting in 2016, culminated in 2018, it was like, I knew there was purpose in what I was doing when you're working. When you go to church every day to work, you kind of figure out that there better be purpose in it. And then now it's like I'm sitting at my desk in my house. Is there still purpose in this?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what really started that whole inner turmoil.
And very
Wrestling.
similarly, I'm sure is this still ministry?
That was a total, I love the local church. And so even in the music business space that I live in, I work 95% of the teams I work with are just worship teams that are releasing music. So I get to still work with the local church, but is pitching a song to Spotify ministry,
Mm-hmm.
and I really, I went through a season. It was pretty dark. This thought was pretty dark. Like, man, I'm wasting my life. And I talked to a mentor, and he was like, there's a lady who's going to get in her car after her kid just got diagnosed with a really bad sickness, and she's going to hit Spotify, and one of the songs that you helped is going to play, and it's going to minister to her. And that wouldn't have happened if you wouldn't have been involved. And I was like, okay, I can reconcile now.
It's amazing how hard it is sometimes to see what God intends us to do that's ministry, and as opposed to our perspective. Like, we think if we're not on a paid staff at a church, we're not doing ministry.
Right.
We're not, volunteering within a church, it's not ministry.
Yeah.
I've struggled with that a lot, even with church gear. Like, am what I'm doing, is that really ministry? And then I've received so much encouragement just from our church techs that we partner with to just say thank you and say, like, this has served us in such amazing ways. And
for me, it's broken into two different spaces. One, I feel like I pastor worship leaders now. So a lot of worship leaders have complicated or conflictive relationships with their senior pastor. So I can come in and help bring some context and some pastoring to help maybe heal that relationship a little bit. And then the other thing is, I was having a meeting yesterday with a guy, and he's like, very successful manager in the music business, and he said, like, I'm a Christian. Everything I do is for Christ, but my job is business. And I was like, well, no, your ministry is actually business. Your ministry is to make sure that your bands can do ministry. And he was like, I've never thought about it that way. And so, even for you, like, your ministry is, there's no ministry on a Sunday if the mics don't work. I mean, there could be, but it's better.
Yeah.
And so your ministry is preparing ministry.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Well, and what a backwards way to think that it could only happen at church, or if we're volunteering at church, because we're supposed to go out from the world after Sunday.
But the thing is so many churches like preach leadership instead of discipleship, right? We need leaders, we need volunteers, we need dream team, we need and all of that's important and good, and when done in a healthy environment is solid. But the truth is, discipleship is where the ministry takes place, and that can happen at Burger King. It doesn't have to be, but we get trained in church, and I'm as guilty as anyone, that this is how you do ministry. You develop leaders, you get them into ministry, you get them doing something so that they can be fulfilled. And the truth is, my doctor's as much of a minister as anyone else. So,
and the dangerous thing can be as well for, our church techs or any paid church staff members to think that their ministry stops when they leave work.
Yeah. Or if they leave that church.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's so much fear. As I talk to teams across the country, there's so much fear that if I leave here, I'm out of God's will, and I'm no longer going to be valuable in ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Because of geography or occupation in a specific church. That's not kingdom.
That is a tough one that they think about, though.
Oh, yeah.
They think about moving churches.
No doubt.
So we've got our hard conversations with ourselves kind of broken up into three sections. We got health, ego, and identity. So let's talk about some health questions.
Well, let's let Bono answer the ego questions. You'll learn why later.
Oh, man. What a good throwback.
So health questions, are we talking like, get your annual checkup at the...
mine's literally next. Yep, mine's next week. You know how hard it is to get a physical? I had to schedule this 4 months ago. That's how booked those things are.
Dang. Do you have to get that, what's the thing where
Colonoscopy?
Colonoscopy.
Have we talked about this on the podcast? Toby I'm going to see if I can say this in a G way. Toby made fun of my peeing habits to the point.
You were peeing like every 15 minutes.
After drinking a full pitcher of smoothie, like spinach and yogurt and all that. So for 2 hours, it'd be kind of intense. But that was it.
I was concerned about your prostate, little buddy.
No, you weren't. You were concerned about how much I was not working during all this pee time.
Can you do work while you're at the urinal?
Well, if you're on the social media manager, yes.
That's right.
Well,
don't go live.
After you guys kid, I will hold the phone like this whenever. Yeah. All this to say, he made fun of me peeing to the degree that I ended up going to the doctor, and things were put in places that I did not expect.
Yeah, you got a check up.
Yeah,
that you were not expecting.
It was painful. It was just kind of weird. It was very weird.
And did you get 2 of them?
Yes.
Yeah.
What?
So that
I bet if you knew who Bono was, they'd only had to give you one.
If they knew I didn't know who Bono was, they'd be like, "We're just gonna let you die." Yeah, so I've taken a lot for church gear.
And everything okay back there, Blake?
I hope so. I don't know
Everything
anymore.
coming out all right? Good.
Yeah, everything's going fine.
Yeah.
So that is the ultimate prank. What you pulled off. All right.
All right, we're talking mental health. Let's not get distracted, Blake. Gosh.
I think this is that thing where, all right, whatever. So in this post-COVID world, this sounds so fancy for us. In this post-COVID world where mental health is such a hot topic, like how do you find yourself checking in on yourself well? Especially now that you're kind of working for yourself and you're outside of like a big staff and it's now, how do you check in on yourself?
Very timely question because I've been exploring how I'm handling this before you guys reached out about doing this podcast. I have one competitive advantage that most people don't. My wife, with what she does, she basically does counseling all day. So I live with a counselor. So that forces you to address things in a different way. But also I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. So feelings and function for a 3 can't coexist. So I will suppress feelings so that I don't affect function because I need to achieve in order to feel valued, which is not healthy, by the way. So, I mean, I've done a lot of counseling. I started going to counseling in 2015 and I was the guy who was like, I don't need counseling. And then 6 months later, I had 2 counselors because I needed so much counseling. And, no matter how great your parents are, no matter how great your life was, your upbringing, whatever it is, there are things in your past that have created trauma that if you don't address it, it will control you and it will affect you. And it will affect every relationship you have, every function that you have, why you do what you do. And so getting clarity on mental health is not always, I'm a mess, how do I get unmessy? A lot of times it's, what have I not addressed that I need to address in order to live the optimum life that God designed for me? And so if you, in your house, if you had a leak and you're like, well, it's just that one little corner over there and mildew's going to grow. Eventually the whole roof's going to fall down. And that's what happens to us in mental health. We have these little areas that we know exist or suspect exist. And if we don't go see somebody and address it, it starts to grow and grow and grow. And before you know what's happening, you're in trauma or crisis. And it's because you never addressed those things that were keeping you from being truly healthy.
I know for church techs, oftentimes like their job is seasonal and they're crazy seasons. How can they distinguish between like, am I going crazy? Like, is my mental health in danger or am I just exhausted and I need to rest?
It's probably both. So if you, even when we go through seasons, and we all have to go through seasons, we all have seasons that the whole church or like work-life balance thing, I'm not a big subscriber to that. I think balance is personalized based on who you are, how you're wired, what your occupation is, your responsibility is, your calling is, a lot of factors. But I think exhaustion is an indicator. It's a warning light on the dashboard of, hey, my life is out of balance to a place right now that I need to make an adjustment or else I'm going to have other problems. And so we think that a vacation or a couple of days off sleeping in is going to solve that. And typically that's not the case. Typically it's a soul issue or mental health issue that, hey, how do I go in and get this? How do I go in and address this in a way that at least I know the tools when I start to feel myself going this way that I can bring myself back?
And exhaustion may be one of them, but what are some other red flags that we should be looking for in ourselves?
Okay, I'm not a professional.
Sure.
Okay.
Your wife is. We
She
should have
is.
brought her.
She's she would be way better at this. But I've made a lot of mistakes. And so I've learned through making a lot of mistakes. Isolation is a huge warning sign. When you feel yourself starting to isolate, pulling away from the things or people that you have loved in the past in a way that you just you have to be alone more. And I'm not talking about like introvert versus extrovert. I'm talking about you are consciously shutting everybody else out. That's a huge first indicator. I think a lot of times substance can also be an indicator. If you need a drink every night, that's a sign that something's probably out of balance, and it may not be a drink. It might be, I mean, I love nerd gummies. Then there's two different packages.
That's so specific.
There's the pink package and the blue package. If I find myself buying a lot of blue packages, I'm like, wait, I'm looking for a dopamine hit right now that's coming through eating this sugar. What's going on? And so, I mean, I think so. Isolation, any kind of abuse. I do think disassociation through your cell phone is an easy way to find a different place that you're living, as opposed to, and it doesn't always have. It's not always bad. It doesn't. A lot of people will be like, it's porn, but I mean, it's not just that. I mean, you can. The average user on TikTok stays on TikTok for 40 minutes.
That's a lot
It's
of
the
time.
highest. It's the highest of all social media consumption lengths. If you see that you're on TikTok for 2 hours a day, you are trying to disassociate from something. I think irritability is another one too. Like, you start to find yourself not having the patience for the things that you normally have the patience for.
Mm-hmm.
So those are all, at least those are all indicators for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed back we alluded to the counseling thing. I couldn't ever be doing something without a podcast going. I always had to have a podcast going, and I figured out I couldn't listen to music because then my mind would roam. Like, I needed to be focused and just ignore everything else. And then I was like, oh, I can listen to music again now that I've gone to counseling. Like,
That's
because I
awesome.
was medicating it with a podcast.
Yeah.
Like that. It's funny how we always think of alcohol or pornography or smoking, whatever it is, those like obvious things that are dependencies, but it can be other things.
And those can be equally as damaging long term.
How do we know when it's time to ask for help?
That's such a good question. I mean,
Poor Brewster, we've pulled him on here for the hardest episode.
Sure did. That's why we went after the goat.
Yeah, like when you're having those hard moments in the past, like whatever you're thinking, like, man, I might need to ask for some help. Like, how?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's I start to notice some of those indicators that we just talked about, and I go, oh, okay, those indicators are definitely being triggered right now. I need to have a conversation. And sometimes, I'm not a big sharer. So I had a situation take place last week, something that was complete. I've never had this experience before. And it was a mental health thing. And I didn't even, it happened. It lasted about 2 minutes, and then it went away. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I think I'm okay now. And so I didn't even think about it. This morning I went to the doctor, and the doctor asked a couple questions. And as she asked questions, I was like, oh, wow. I didn't tell my wife about this. I need to go home and tell her about it. So then I went home and told her about it. And it was like, oh, yeah, that happened. So I think you just have to be in tune to yourself, right? Like, no one can be in tune to you for you. Even the people that love you the most, they don't know what's really going on in your head. And a lot of times what's going on in your head is a byproduct of what's going on in your soul, right? And so, making sure that you're checking in with yourself. And that's probably a daily, sometimes hourly exercise.
For me, one of the signs that I knew I needed help is, so Blake and I used to go to the same church.
I thought he was about to say I was the reason who needed help.
I hired Blake, and
yes, exactly.
Oh man.
So I was at Fellowship Bible, and I mean, one of the reasons I started Church Gear is because I love worship and tech staff members at churches. Like, any church I'm at, like, those are my boys and girls. Like, I love them, I support them, I encourage them. And so at 9 years at Fellowship, I had developed relationships with all these guys and girls. And like, those were some of my good friendships. And then we switched churches for our kids because they needed a different environment. And I didn't know any of the worship and tech people yet. And at the same time, I had started a business, And there's like categories of relationships, and it's different than, when you're working with people that you see every day, it doesn't automatically mean that you're deep friends.
Right.
You work together and you can be good friends. And so I was listening to a message at Church of the City, and Darren Whitehead was talking about when he was in ministry early on and miscategorizing relationships. And he said he had not experienced so much pain as when he miscategorized relationships, and he realized there are confidants, people that are in your life that are for you.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be for you no matter what, and they're there, to be your confidant. And then there are colleagues,
Mm-hmm.
people that work and serve alongside you who are there for the mission.
Mm-hmm.
They are on board for the same mission, and that's why they're there. They're not there for you, they're there for the mission. And so that was a real eye-opening moment. And I know for a lot of our techs, when they switch churches, their whole support system of those people that were their confidants, and now they're going to a new church and just assuming I'll find new confidants. And that's not an easy thing to do.
No.
You got new colleagues, you're all there for the same mission, but to build those confidant relationships, and we have to have those in our lives.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to need help.
Well, and did you and I talk about this? Is there a third?
Confidants, colleagues, and comrades.
Okay.
Comrades are people that essentially disagree with the same things you disagree with.
Gotcha.
So you're willing to go to a rally together and fight against an issue together.
It's a little too soon for that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine Toby at any rally ever.
I want to see you at a rally, and I want to know what the rally is for.
Done.
Tacos have been outlawed.
Yeah.
That's what would
That's
get
not
Toby at
gonna
a
work.
rally.
I heard a version of that too. That there's also people that are calling, and those are people that are in your life for you to invest in. And there's nothing in that relationship for you. It's all about you pouring into them.
Yeah.
And I think church is one of the most complicated places when it comes to occupation, because if I work at a business here in Franklin, if I get fired or decide to leave, I leave my work friends, but my church doesn't change. My kids' community doesn't change for youth group. My small group still stays the same. My pastor's still the same. That big, huge faith component of my life isn't completely altered when I leave my job in the marketplace and go from A to B.
Yeah.
I start over. It's complicated. It's difficult, but it's not earth-shattering. When somebody gets let go from a church or decides to leave a church, you are literally taking that entire faith component and shifting it. And so now you have a new pastor that you have to learn how to trust. Your kids have to go to a new youth group, your new community group. It massively alters. So I tell churches all the time, hiring is expensive, firing is way more expensive. And it doesn't just cost money, it's costing mental health in a lot of ways.
And would you say that all of us need to have, key relationships in different buckets so that, for a church tech or any church staff member, all your relationships aren't in the church bucket?
Yeah, and naturally you're at war, right? We're in a spiritual war. And so you're at war every week with your buddies. So you're going to get close to those people. But I think the intentionality of having relationships that exist beyond just that group is vital, because when that group goes away, and typically everything has a beginning, middle, and end.
Especially ministry jobs.
Yeah. It's going to end at some point. Even if your end is you die, it's going to end, right? And so when it ends, what do you have to lean on? You've got to have something beyond just that. Now, that's not saying don't invest in that. I think you should invest in that. You're on a mission together. You're trying to accomplish something together. But I think it's super important that we're developing relationships beyond just. That's one of the things you guys do well with this podcast and social media, is help guys and girls connect with each other in the church gear space. So, which is really cool.
Heck, I hope so. If we're doing that makes me feel thrilled.
Yeah, what's great is if you leave a church and move to a different church, you can still have all your friends in the tech community that are
Right.
at different churches.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes that might be the door to get you into your next church job.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. I've seen the Facebook groups. The Facebook groups for church techs are massive. So that's been another good place that people can find community. Okay. So then let's move on to ego, Toby.
Yeah. Back to Bono.
Oh my good. Why do y'all keep saying that?
I mean, Bono has a very healthy ego.
Okay.
But
Healthy
it's
in a
not the
good
kind of
way.
ego. I mean, it's not the kind of ego that you're like, that guy's a jerk. It's the kind of ego of like, that guy knows what he's doing.
Well, isn't humility is not like thinking less of yourself. It's just knowing exactly what you are.
Thinking of yourself less, according to C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis
Yes.
quote.
That is correct.
Lord of the Rings wasn't that great.
That's
okay.
not C.S. Lewis.
Was it not?
No.
No, that was Tolkien. That was Tolkien. I remembered that.
Another
That
one.
was C.S. Lewis's
Okay.
very dear friend.
Another
J.R.R.
one.
Tolkien. So
Which-
you're in the same genre.
That was probably his
Do
confidant.
you know who wrote the Bible?
Jesus Christ.
Literally not.
No, it was like 52 different people, 62 different people.
You sure about that?
Well, now I'm not. I went to the oldest Baptist college in the world, and I think my degree should be revoked.
I think it's safe to go with Holy Spirit. I think
There we go.
Go there, and then from there you can at least battle that.
Yes.
You
X number of Holy Spirit inspired authors.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't do good on the spiritual
And
fights.
Bono.
And
And Bono.
At least
YouTube
Psalm 40.
catalog
He wrote
is-
Psalm 40.
that's
Do you know what Psalm 40 is?
What's Psalm 40?
You're going to go research it tonight, Blake. Okay.
Got a lot of homework after this.
it is actually Psalm 40.
From the
but
Bible.
Also,
Written by the Holy Spirit.
yeah.
And
But
Bono.
also Psalm 40.
And then it's a song that Bono stole from the Bible called Psalm 40. You should check it out.
Has God sued him for plagiarism yet?
I think they have
it's,
to split royalties, but
Yes. Open source, what's that called?
public domain.
Yeah.
Oh,
And the
my
song's just
goodness.
called 40, I think.
Mhm.
But for
Yeah.
Psalm 40. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, well, then he cited
is-
his source.
That was the one song where the Edge and Adam Clayton would switch.
Yeah.
I know.
Do you know who those guys are?
I actually heard about The Edge on a podcast for the
Our
Ringer Network.
podcast?
Well, it was on the Ringer Network, too. Bill Simmons was talking about
on
hanging
the
out
Ringer
with him.
podcast.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to ego, which mine has taken a good hit. All right, so how do we find contentment in our role and position? That's a tough one.
I mean, contentment. I don't know that I
Because now you're in a new role, new
unpopular
position.
opinions, okay? I'm not 100% sure that I even subscribe to contentment
Ooh.
because I want to be content, but I never want to lose the edge or desire to steward everything that God's put in my life to the maximum that I can steward it.
Sounds like an Enneagram 3.
Right.
Oh,
That's the
yes.
thing. It's a problem. I know that's a personal thing, like there's other people that would hate that answer, and so, which I understand, and you can hate it. But for me, contentment for me is knowing that I've given it everything I've got. And when we're talking with teams, I always tell them our responsibility is effort, energy, availability, and stewardship. God's responsibility is how people respond to it. And so I can't be responsible for how you respond to the song that I wrote or the sermon I wrote or the design that I created or any of the things that I do. I can't be responsible for your reaction to that. But I can be content when I know that I've given it everything that I've got. I was available and I showed up. I was committed to it. I brought the best energy that I have to it, and that I stewarded it in a way that would make the Lord happy. If I can do those 4 things, then I can feel content. A lot of times I think we misplace contentment with how people respond to the thing that we're responsible to do. Right? So you guys may not be content if 5 people listen to this podcast, but you would be, if you did your best, you should be able to walk away and look in the mirror and look at the Lord and say, hey, I gave it everything I had. And so it just didn't work. And that's okay. That's how we learn.
I think me and Toby's definition of Blake's best change. So I'm like, I did our best, Toby. We got Stephen Brewster on the podcast for 4 listeners. I mean,
That's right.
should be content.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to my worship days. Like I was constantly discontent. Is that
Yeah.
a word?
Mm-hmm.
I constantly looked at looking at like Crowder and Wickham and Tomlin and thinking like, why can't I be that successful and feeling discontent? And now, having started Church Gear, like I absolutely love what I'm doing and getting to serve the church. I could look at Sweetwater and think like Sweetwater's 1,000 times bigger than us and be discontent, but I'm not. I'm completely content doing what I'm doing, but at the same time, in another 5-10 years, I don't want to be exactly where I am personally.
Well, and that's the tension for me with contentment.
Like I want to grow in who I am. I'm still happy to be owning and running Church Gear in 5 to 10 years, but I want to be better at doing that.
And I think contentment is the byproduct of gratitude. So when you can look at your life and thank the Lord for it and talk about ego, put the pieces in the right boxes, right? Like I didn't build this business. God built this business. I showed up and stewarded it. And so when you can live from a place of gratitude, that's going to birth contentment. Whereas I think a holy discontent is I'm not gonna settle for where we're at, because there's always better, there's always improvement, there's always more that you could chase. When more becomes the goal, and stewardship is not the goal, gratitude is not the goal, then all of a sudden you'll never be content.
Well, and I would say that like contentment has a good biblical basis because of the story of the talents. Like the one person that was given the talent and they kept it and they did nothing with it and then they returned it, and that was kind of like didn't go over well. Like we're supposed to want to produce more with what we're given.
And one of my favorite quotes of all time is comparison is the enemy of contentment. And I think that is completely applicable when you compare yourself to other people. But if you compare yourself to your potential, I think it is a healthy way to look at it. Like, I know God has me in this role. Let's say I'm a production director at a church and truly believe God has placed me here, but there's a bigger church across town. Like, that's unhealthy to look at it that way. But to look at it as, am I the best version of myself as the production director of this church? Or do I need to invest in growth and find mentors and read and go to conferences and just continue to get better at what God has called me to do?
Totally.
You talked on gratitude. Have either of y'all ever done a gratitude list?
Every morning.
Oh, really?
I write down 3 things every morning that I'm thankful for.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I heard about it during COVID, and it's like truly of all the mind tricks out there, which is weird to try to trick yourself, but like a gratitude list has 100% success rate for me. If you start listing, if you're having a bad day or in a bad spot and you start listing out all the things you're grateful for, you cannot at least go back to homeostasis. You might not go to euphoria, but you can get back to homeostasis with a gratitude list every time.
That sounded like a lot of science.
Well, then it was probably all if it was coming from me.
I remember slight left turn, but I remember a pastor when I was a teenager. He talked to us about his marriage, and he had been married a long time, at least 20 years at that point. And he said, my first or second year of marriage, I just started to become really discontent. And I'd look at my wife and think like, did I make a mistake? Like, could I have done better?
Wait, he said this on a podcast?
No, he said this.
Is this interpersonally or on stage?
I think this was like a small group of teenage boys.
Okay.
And so he said he made a conscious decision that every single morning he was going to thank God for his wife. And he said he committed to do that every single day. And he's like, it completely changed my perspective.
Of course.
After 6 months or a year, he said, I absolutely was all bought in on my wife.
Yeah.
And it,
I hope she never hears that story.
Yeah, I hope she's like, yeah, boy, I was having to do that too, but it took me a lot of things to be thankful for.
20 years later, I'm still asking God.
The resolution on your face. Oh, man. Okay, so then if we're trying to be contentment, I guess a lot of that is like assessing our value to be content with. This is what I'm valued as, and I should be happy with that to some degree. Like, Stephen, when you're having those hard conversations with yourself, how do you talk to yourself about your value and think about that?
I mean, I don't.
Just look at the bank account, the Instagram followers, the fans outside your window.
No, Instagram followers, that's the worst place to go because I used to post every day and now I'm lucky if I post twice a week. And so that's actually a place I go for shame because I know what I'm supposed to be doing and I'm not doing it. And so I found myself not even opening Instagram for like 2 or 3 weeks because I was like, I felt shame that I wasn't stewarding that gift the way I should be, right? So answering that question, I mean, I don't know. The conversations I have with myself are probably not they never start in the healthiest place. Okay. And it's funny when people talk about ego, there's not a harsher critic on Steve Brewster than Steve Brewster. And so the things that I tell myself, if somebody else told me, we'd probably get in a fight. And so I think a lot of times for us as leaders and ministers on some level is we've got to identify what is it that we're doing where are we telling ourselves lies, right? And it's why it's so important that we have people in our lives that we can go to and say, hey, this is what I think about myself today. What part of this is true? And then what part of this is fabrication? Because we are not a good indicator of ourselves. Okay? And so you've got it. That's why we've got to have somebody who can give us some perspective. So at least for me.
See if you agree or disagree with this, but I feel like traditionally worships and creatives have, their perspective on themselves is the reverse in a sense that they think too highly of themselves. I mean, I used to be a worship and I thought like, I'm amazing. I could do anything. And I look at other artists and other creatives and think like, how come they're getting all the accolades? Because I'm just as awesome. But I feel like techs are actually the reverse, where they think so lowly of themselves. They feel like, well, the only place that I'm worth doing anything is in the background behind a booth.
Yeah. Well, anytime our value is found in what we do, not who we are, it's misplaced value. Okay. So
That is such a good quote for the episode.
You're welcome. Anytime. Yeah. Because, and as a 3 on the Enneagram, this is also very difficult. I'm not what I do. Right? And none of us are what we do, but a lot of us get trapped in what we do. So we misplace our identity. Our identity doesn't stay in Christ. Our identity stays in our function and how people respond to our function. And that's a very fickle place to live and a very unhealthy place to live. So if you want to see the counselor forever, keep living in that space, right? But if you want to get to a healthy place, have people in your life, have a community, and spend enough time with the Lord that you start to identify who He's called you to be and let them reinforce who He's called you to be so that you can actually live from that place. And when you start living from that place, the conversation you have with yourself is a whole lot nicer. So,
yeah, truly, I relate to this on a deep level because that's one of the things, like you say, like you want to see the counselor forever. Like was able to kind of push those to not so frequently because I got to that place. Did Wholehearted at How Fellowship does that. Just finished that and making that move from like who you are is not like what you do, but whose you are has been like the most freeing mental shift of my life.
Yeah, it's massive.
Okay, so even if you are clear on whose you are, you still got to get paid to make a living.
Cash money.
So how do you get to a healthy point to believe what you are actually worth and to ask or search for a job of what you're actually worth, as opposed to thinking, you know what, I guess the church can only pay me this. Well, it's ministry and I'll just suffer.
Well, no one's going to pay you what you're really worth. Even you as a business owner, you're not making what you're really worth. Okay, so if I took the number of hours you spend running this business and I divided it by your hourly rate, you're probably making about $2 an hour, and you're worth more than that, But I think it's where what you're worth also comes in value of community, fulfillment, joy, community, like being in a community that brings you some of those things, joy and fulfillment. And so some of the return on what you're worth may not come fiscally, and probably most of it won't come fiscally. But what is the experience and the quality of life that you're going to live in this position or community or space or geographical location in order to really, then you can take a holistic look at, is this worth it? Because, I mean, there's not a church job. I I have to take that back. There's a lot of senior pastors that have great church jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else, there's not a church job that's paying you your worth. But your worth is never going to be quantified by a paycheck. It's quantified by what you do for the kingdom, how you feel about it, how you can reconcile it, so.
Like Blake has kind of told me that what he gets paid at Church Gear is in kind of like Church Gear dollars, as opposed to if he worked at Amazon or some corporate
I call it
giant.
the Church Gear discount.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I've talked to other people about this, but I totally have. And I'm like, listen, well, I try to, how real I get on the podcast is always such a metric. When you have conversations with people, it's like, look, could anyone at Church Gear go make X, and this is similar to a church, I would say, like X amount of more dollars somewhere like Amazon or corporate place?
Sure.
Yes. I don't know what that number is for you. Maybe it's 50%, maybe it's 20%. But Church Gear, like, would that place be fun to be at? Would it feel like missional work? Would you enjoy the people you're around? Like, there's all those benefits.
100%.
And so I tell people,
and all of those benefits are worth way more than any dollar.
Yeah.
Any dollar.
So I'm always like, now the Church Gear discount can't be 100%. You can't work for free. But I'm like, you gotta just tell yourself, yes, I'll, like, kind of what you said, you'll never be paid what you're worth, but also, like, is it within a range that is livable? Because
well, you have to take care of yourself and your family, right? That's stewardship. But put a dollar amount on enjoying your job. How do you do that? You like to come here. You like to work with the people that you work with, except for Toby. You love going out and working with these other churches and helping them find new contentment, joy, commitment, whatever. So, you can't put a dollar on that. And I know your staff, lots of great people. You probably can't pay them what they're worth. But we're into something bigger than ourselves. And so
one person at Church Gear is paid what they're worth, but everybody else is completely underpaid.
I like that.
I see where that's going. For the record,
Blake,
though,
why do you make so much money?
Yeah. Just for the record, since we are hiring, Church Gear does pay, I think, actually a little better than I think most people would expect, because Toby's like a good dude behind all the jokes. But yeah, that's really good.
Where do I get the application?
Steven, this is not a joke.
We tried to recruit you, and
Hey, I gave you a very good.
You did.
I gave you a very, very good result.
Counterbalance to Blake. Is that how we're?
I would say.
Listen, you seriously brought us one of my favorite people in the world.
So on that subject, real quick, I've talked to so many church techs that talk about their position in the church and their pay, and we all know churches don't always pay great.
Yep.
And they know that they could make more money if they go out on the road.
Mm-hmm.
But they have to weigh all those benefits.
All the costs, yeah.
And Dennis Choi said it best. He's like, it comes down to calling. Like, am I called to be at this church? And hopefully that comes with the joy and the benefits of being part of that mission. But for some people, it is the right move to leave and go hit the road.
And you're going to know when that grace lifts. That grace is going to lift off of you, and you're going to know, and you're not going to be able to be content anymore. It doesn't matter how great your generosity list is, your gratitude list is. It's not going to do the job anymore, because there are seasons when it's time to go. And I think don't stay somewhere that you don't believe in. I'm a firm believer. If you wouldn't attend your church, you shouldn't work at it.
That's quote that right there.
That's pretty solid.
Yeah, that's gonna be tough for some people to swallow. But
so
yes.
If you wouldn't attend that church, and you're not willing to tithe to that church, then why are you taking a check from that church? Go find another church that you can believe in, a pastor that you can believe in, a team that you can believe in, that you would attend, and then go work there and bring your gifts and your skills and talents to that. But the minute that you start realizing you're taking a check from a place you wouldn't attend, dangerous place.
I mean, that's just the same reason they'll never listen to this. That's the same reason I told you I switched over to Church Gear. I was just making my next boss his next car, like buy his next fancy car over here, get to help church techs. So,
should I not tell you that I'm buying a car?
Toby, listen.
It's another Ford Flex, Blake.
You're going to take all of my... There we go.
So our listening audience doesn't know that my wife and I have been addicted to Ford Flexes for... I think we bought our first in 2009 or 10. So we've had 3 of them now, but unfortunately Ford has stopped producing them as of 2020.
You're stuck then.
I know.
You need to, what's your current one? What year?
2019.
Ooh.
I know.
You might want to just put a 2020 like in the garage so that it'll be there for you when the 2019
That's
dies.
a good point, yeah.
Like, save it.
Find the lowest mileage one out there and just stock
Have you
stock 'em
seen
up in
this?
the
His
garage.
car, Steven? It's so ugly.
No.
It's like a little square.
So what
It's
are
a
you
big
going to do
square.
next then? Like where do you go? I mean, you go to a Jeep?
I am like my brother got a Tesla and not the Tesla
Okay, now
specifically.
that's a heck of a jump, bro.
but-
From a Ford Flex to a Tesla.
That's a flex right
Like-
there.
That is a flex.
Driving an electric car was just so elating to me. Like it's whisper quiet and
Yeah,
smooth.
it's
and
amazing.
so I definitely have my eye on getting an electric car.
Same.
Well, and like the government just put out like a new program on it, so you can get some money back. They're getting more affordable.
That sounds good.
Okay, so we kind of already we started scratching the surface pretty hard there on identity, talking about like having your identity in the right spot. So let's move over to there. So what do I believe my identity is really in relation to my tech director role? Toby, I don't know that I understand our own question.
So is my identity in being the production director or tech director at my church and what I do? Or is it and should it be found in something else? And
Well, it definitely should not be found in being the tech director.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 101, right? The tech director is what you do. Who are you? Who are you as a dad, as a husband, as a friend, as a colleague, as a child of the Lord? Like those are the questions I need answered. So you know how to run tech amazingly. Well, cool. If you're a jerk, or you don't, I mean, who cares? So yeah, basic, easy answer.
And what are some healthy ways to get affirmation outside of your role at your church?
Tell me a little more about that question.
So if all your identity is in what you do and you feel like if you're not a great production director, what are you? What are some other avenues? Like you mentioned being a dad and being a husband, what are some of those places that they should look for outside of their church to engage in healthy fulfillment?
Yeah, I had a friend who he would call me like every other day and be like, "Hey, what do you know about this? Hey, what do you know about this?" And I got so frustrated with him. I was like, "Bro, you need a hobby." And so he went and got a hobby, and it was one of the like best things for him because it brought a space where he found clarity, right? So I would encourage you, go find some things to do that bring you clarity away from what you do, away from tech, away from church. And then just ask yourself, like do a little inventory. How are you investing in yourself? If you can't lead yourself, you can't lead anyone else. Okay? And so I say when I talk to teams, leading yourself starts with how do you lead yourself spiritually? If you don't lead yourself spiritually, you're in trouble. You can't lead anyone else. How do you lead yourself physically? The exec team at Google have to log into the gym 90 minutes a day because the stress that they're under requires that level of endorphins
Wow.
to be able to handle it. Okay, how do you handle yourself spiritually? Creatively. How do you handle yourself creatively? What are you doing every day to be more creative? God's called us all to be creative. If you're a tech guy and you're like, I'm not creative, yes, you are. You make things work that nobody understands. If you solve problems or have ideas, you're creative. How do you mentally, how do you find space to make sure that you're good, to check in on yourself? How are you learning something every day? So just take those 5 things, put them on a note card, put across the top of the note card, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Right before you go to bed at night, pass, fail test, check mark. What did I do? Okay? Look at that at the end of the week. You're going to know where you're missing. And those are going to be things that'll help you start to find that rounded out health because misplaced identity is really mental health. It's just hasn't totally manifested at that point.
Mm-hmm. So I could hear some of our listeners, their wheels, their
They be turning.
gears, their gears in their head are turning, and they're thinking, okay, well, what I'm going to do outside of my ministry is I'm going to go to smaller churches around town and help them with their tech setups. And I'm thinking, does that count as a hobby, or are you just trying to find the same identity? You're just
trying to
else?
you're trying to find, and I don't even know if you're trying to find identity. I think you're trying to find worth, right? You're trying to have somebody tell you you're worthy, and you're already worthy. You're worthy because you showed up. You're worthy because you keep showing up. And so your worth is not found in what you do, it's found in who you are. God cares a lot more about who you're becoming than what you're creating. And so do your thing that you go do should have nothing to do with your occupation. So my friend was a singer. He started playing golf. Now I need him to sing more. I'm like, bro, if I see one more golf post, it's over. So yeah, no, you can't go. Don't go. Finding the thing that fulfills you and fills you back up cannot be pouring it into somebody else. It just doesn't work that way. Import, export.
Yeah. I think the most common thing I see from our church texts is smoking meat. There's a lot
of
hobby.
Meat smokers. I think we need to blame Lee Fields for this, but he's definitely a culprit. He and Nick Kofall. So.
Well, there's something though about that's good company to be in. There's something about like cooking or any kind of that type of activity,
creative
that kind
exercise.
It allows you to be creative, but then you don't have to stress out about it as much, because that's the same way that cocktails are for me or baking is for my wife.
Yeah,
kind of just lets you chill out.
Yeah, find the thing that's totally different, that fulfills you. If it's making meat, great, send it our way.
Would love some smoked meat. Toby, what would be your thing? What do you do that's not gear?
So in, I want to say 2018, 2019, I was trying to find something that would unplug me from buying and selling gear. Because anytime I'd be online, it's just what I would gravitate to. I'd try and find more gear. And so I bought an Xbox One.
Yeah.
Because you can't play video games and shop for gear at the same time.
It's difficult.
So I got that. And then, very shortly after that, I came up with the idea for church gear. And so I just resold the Xbox because I never played it.
I do think it's important, though, finding something that shuts your brain.
Yeah.
Like that part of your work brain down.
Mm-hmm.
So my homework is to learn about Bono and read Psalm 40, and Toby's is to find a hobby.
A new Xbox.
The thing that I do is go for drives in the country. Like I will put on a book on tape or music or a podcast, and I'll go on drives.
Does the Ford Flex have a tape player?
Steven, assassin. That was great.
Books on tapes that have been digitized and uploaded into my phone.
Oh, okay,
No.
great, good.
So
good.
yes, I
just
got
didn't know
that.
if that was like a retro feature you could add to the 2019 Flex.
I mean, we get asked to purchase like cassette duplicators from churches sometimes. So I wonder if I could set that up in my Ford Flex.
That'd be amazing.
Then I could feel like Sweetwater, because the founder of Sweetwater, his story is that like he had a 4-track recorder in the back of his van in the late 70s. That's how he got started in studio.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's killer.
I know.
Speaking of things that are killer, would love to wrap us on a killer tech takeaway from you. Our tech takeaway for this themed episode, though, is a bit different. Obviously, it's not technical, that you could pull a curveball on us and surprise us with one. But if you were going to give a tech takeaway on just hard conversations with yourself, what would that be? How to basically summing up your episode or a random piece of advice on the topic, whether it's how to do them well, how to know what to think about, or how to identify something. I'm kind of vamping here at this point because I'm asking you very ethereal questions. So it's kind of giving you some brain time.
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, the Digimaster 427, is that a tech machine? I don't think so.
I'm sure it is.
I don't know. I mean, I think the summary is you matter. Okay, we need you as a tech director. We need you as a human more than we need you as a tech director. And there's a lot of people that care about you. And even when your brain is telling you a lot of things that aren't true about yourself, they're not true. And I believe passionately that the whispers that you hear in your head have to be whispers because the devil doesn't want anyone to be able to hear the lies he's telling you, right? And so anytime you start to hear those lies, write them down. And when you start to write them down, you start to see how preposterous they are. And then you go, wait a minute, I've been believing all of this stuff? And then the Bible's full of promises about who God says you are. So start writing down 2 promises a day and then compare it to your list of lies. And then you're going to be able to go, okay, if I lose my job today, it's not the end of the world because I know who I am and I'm important and I'm valuable and God's got something else. And so in closing, I would just say, you matter that much. You matter enough to God that he put you on this planet at this time for this purpose and season and reason. And we need you. And it has nothing to do with what you do, but it has everything to do with who you are.
Man, I feel like I could run through a wall right now, Toby. Oh, well, Stephen, we appreciate you coming on, man, and sharing some of this wisdom and taking on the hardest topic of these.
Yeah, you didn't give me any softballs, so.
This is easily our most serious episode we've ever done.
Yeah.
In over a year. So
yeah, we need some buffoonery quick.
We'll get there.
As a 7, you do don't like being around all these emotions right now.
No, it's very uncomfortable.
When I told him about the hard conversation series, I was like, now, Toby, we're going to talk about some hard things. He's like, in a funny way, some hard things with some jokes. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, man, do you want to plug anything? I mean, I know you say you haven't been on social for 3 weeks or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm back now a little bit. I mean, you can find me on my socials. I also do a podcast with MXU. It's the MXU Worship Podcast. And so I get to interview a bunch of my friends who are in the music world, writing songs and leading worship all over the country. And we're having a blast with that. And then, I mean...
Didn't your wife just come out with a book?
An amazing book. So it's an Enneagram book for people who are married or about to get married. And it's a workbook. And what's so fun is we've had so many people come back to us and say, I wish I had this book when I got married 20 years ago because I would know my partner so much better. And so, yeah, she's got a killer book. She's amazing. EnneagramWithJB.com. You can go there, find out all her stuff. She's the best.
Real talk, me and Allison were taking a walk at Carton about 2 days after that came out, and we passed these two women on our left, and they were talking about his wife's book. Because I heard Enneagram, her book, and Brewster.
That's hilarious.
So, I thought that was...
I said, when you told me that, I said, I hope they both bought a case.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, she is definitely the prize in your marriage.
oh my gosh. Even before books. But I tell her she's the retirement plan now, so...
Yeah.
That's fun. Oh, well, I guess we're going to retire on this episode. So thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It means a lot.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the Church Gear Studios.
Blake, I feel like we are, going back on our advice a little bit where we were talking about maybe not being on social media as much. But if we could just ask them to hop on social media real quick and do something for us.
Yeah, I mean, that would be great. And they could share this episode, or I got a loophole, Toby. You ready?
Okay.
I got a workaround.
Yes.
I'm going to be a tech. I'm going to find a solution. Just text it to a buddy. Someone that you're like, you really need to hear this episode. This is going to make you feel better. And also, have you vented to me less? Maybe text them this episode. It's not social and it'll be great. They'll love it.
Yeah. And this is our second podcast recording of the day. So I'm going to need an extra counseling session to work through all the issues that you created within me, Blake.
Don't worry. I got a couples one scheduled for us in 30 minutes.
Okay, great.
Massage to follow.
Looking forward to it.